Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's wrap up week 35 with Second Age Saturday. Now, last week we began reading the seafaring romance, the cautionary tale, Aldarion and Arendis, the mariner's wife, from Unfinished Tales. We ended with Meneldur advising his son, who was about to go on a sailing adventure with his grandfather, the legendary sailor Vëantur, to not become enamored of the great lands, you who one day must be king and father of this isle. But maybe it's not the great lands that we need to be concerned about. Thus it came to pass that on a morning of fair sun and white wind, in the bright spring of the 725th year of the Second Age, the son of the king's heir of Númenor sailed from the land, and ere day was over, he saw it sink shimmering into the sea, and last of all the peak of the Meneldur as a dark finger against the sunset. It is said that Aldarion himself wrote records of all his journeys to Middle-earth, and they were long preserved in Ravenna, though all were afterwards lost. Of his first journey little is known, save that he made the friendship of Círdan and Gil-galad, and journeyed far in Lindon and the west of Eriador, and marveled at all that he saw. He did not return for more than 2 years, and Meneldur was in great disquiet. It is said that his delay was due to the eagerness he had to learn all that he could of Círdan, both in the making and management of ships, and in the building of walls to withstand the hunger of the sea. There was joy in Ravenna and Armenelos when men saw the great ship Númenor, which signifies west wings, coming up from the sea, her golden sails reddened in the sunset. The summer was nearly over, and the Eruhantale was nigh. It seemed to Meneldur when he welcomed his son in the house of Vëantur that he had grown in stature, and his eyes were brighter, but they looked far away. "What did you see, Onya, in your far journeys that now lives most in memory?" But Aldarion, looking east towards the night, was silent. At last he answered, but softly, as one that speaks to himself. "The fair people of the elves, the green shores, the mountains wreathed in cloud, the regions of mist and shadow beyond guess. I do not know." He ceased, and Meneldur knew that he had not spoken his full mind, for Aldarion had become enamored of the great sea, and of a ship riding there alone without sight of land, borne by the winds with foam at its throat to coasts and havens unguessed, and that love and desire never left him until his life's end. And folks, that's the theme of the story right there. This love for the sea will cost. Now, back to the story, but just for a bit. Vëantur did not again voyage from Númenor, but the Númenor he gave in gift to Aldarion. Within 3 years, Aldarion begged leave to go again, and he set sail for Lindon. He was 3 years abroad, and not long after, another voyage he made that lasted for 4 years. For it is said that he was no longer content to sail to Mithlond, but began to explore the coasts southwards, past the mouths of Branduin and Gwathlo and Angren, and he rounded the dark cape of Ras Morthil, and beheld the great bay of Belfalas, and the mountains of the country of Amroth, where the Nandor elves still dwell. That's at least 9 years on the sea between the time he turns 25 and where we pick up next week when he's 39. 14 years and more than half of it spent on the water, instead of with the people who will be his subjects as king. Now, at the beginning, we read this bit about Aldarion heading off as the son of the king's heir. Now, that's because Meneldur himself isn't king yet. It's actually going to be 15 more years before Tar Elendil hands the scepter off to him. There's also a mention of Eruhantale. Now, that's basically Thanksgiving in Númenor, so it tells us when Aldarion is coming home here. This is their harvest feast. Now, we read about this and the other feasts in another part of Unfinished Tales, a description of the island of Númenor. Near to the center of the Mithalmar stood the tall mountain called Meneldur, pillar of the heavens, sacred to the worship of Eru Ilúvatar. Though the lower slopes of the mountain were gentle and grass-covered, it grew ever steeper, and towards the summit it could not be scaled, but a winding spiral road was made upon it, beginning at its foot upon the south and ending below the lip of the summit upon the north. For the summit was somewhat flattened and depressed, and could contain a great multitude. But it remained untouched by hands throughout the history of Numenor. No building, no raised altar, not even a pile of undressed stones ever stood there. And no other likeness of a temple did the Numenorians possess in all the days of their grace until the coming of Sauron. There no tool or weapon had ever been born, and there none might speak any word, save the king only. Thrice only in each year the king spoke, offering prayer for the coming year at the Erukirme in the first days of spring, praise of Eru Iluvatar at the Erulaitale in midsummer, and thanksgiving to him at the Eruhantale at the end of autumn. At these times the king ascended the mountain on foot, followed by a great concourse of the people, clad in white and garlanded, but silent. At other times the people were free to climb the summit alone or in company, but it is said that the silence was so great that even a stranger, ignorant of Numenor and all its history, if he were transported thither, would not have dared to speak aloud. Love that passage, and I know it was just an excuse to read that, but that's one of those three festivals. That gives us a time of his return on that voyage. Now, there are a couple of place names at the end that also give us some clues, in this case as to the dating of the story. Christopher Tolkien explains that Sir Angren was the elvish name of the river Isen. Ras Morthil, a name not otherwise found, must be the great headland at the end of the northern arm of the Bay of Belfalas, which was also called Andrast, Long Cape. The reference to the country of Amroth, where the Nandor elves still dwell, can be taken to imply that the tale of Aldarion and Eärendil was written down in Gondor before the departure of the last ship from the haven of the Sylvan elves near Dol Amroth in the year 1981 of the Third Age. Otherwise, the text would say where the Nandor elves formerly dwelt, or something else along those lines. For now, folks, that does it for this week's Second Age Saturday. Thank you for joining me, and please come back next week as Tar Meneldur becomes king, Aldarion gets his buddies together in a guild, and his actions drive an estrangement and increasing enmity with his father, the king. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus episode, and more. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. And please like or subscribe on your podcast apps. Follow @TolkienTimes on social media. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.